Hello everyone, welcome to the Lightning Ball channel. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and activate the notification bell. Your support fuels my continued efforts. In our previous episode, Ivarage gave herself the name Luvel Rage, pushing her power even higher. Yet, despite possessing both a massive beast avatar and a true core body, Luvel Rage was still humiliated. Her giant form was effortlessly destroyed by Rimuru. Enraged, Luvel Rage turned her sights toward Rimuru's true weakness, the people on the battlefield protected by complete fixation. That despicable and malicious move was unexpectedly seen through by Shion, who lay hidden within the ice statues, and she unleashed a god-slaying strike. In this episode, Rimuru completely defeated Luvel Rage. Along the way, Gaia evolved into a true dragon, and in defeat, Luvel Rage finally understood why she could never attain omniscience and omnipotence. Rimuru, having brought her down, obtained the title of Great Demon Lord, ascending to a level above all other demon lords. So let's get started. Shion's shocking god-slaying attack, an ambush from above, only inflicted a light scratch at Luvel Rage's fingertips, but the result was decisive. Luvel Rage was forced to release the orb she had been clutching in both hands. The orb resembled a yin-yang diagram, a sphere formed by interlocking black and white magatama, radiating an eerie, profound allure. The instant the orb flew free, Gaia, who had been cradled in Milim's arms, lunged forward without hesitation and swallowed it whole. Milim screamed in alarm, telling him not to eat random suspicious things. But Rimuru immediately judged that Gaia hadn't done so by accident. This was a deliberate act, fitting of a being with true dragon-level intelligence. Deprived of the orb, Luvel Rage collapsed, clutching her head in agony. At that moment, Ciel revealed the orb's true nature, and a deeper truth behind it. The orb was most likely a relic left behind by Veldanava and Lucia. Luvel Rage had absorbed their power and authorities, but she had failed to seize this core component. While we as readers might already suspect why, Rimuru had long wondered how Ivarage could assimilate Veldanava so easily. Ciel casually dropped a bombshell. The two had originally been the same existence. Rimuru was stunned. The god of creation and the god of destruction had originated from a single source. That explained why Veldanava had possessed no means to prevent assimilation. And it also meant that Shion's strike earlier had effectively severed the primordial bond between creation and destruction itself, an utterly staggering feat. Ciel followed up with yet another round of overpraise, claiming everything had gone exactly as Rimuru-sama had anticipated. Rimuru immediately rejected that internally. Absolutely not, and once again felt a headache coming on from Ciel's chronic habit of overestimating her master. At the same time, Luvel Rage, now without the orb, seemed to steel her resolve. She spread her wings and rose into the sky, glaring down at everyone from above and roaring that this was unforgivable. As her curse-like scream echoed, her power began to spike abnormally. Ciel reported that Luvel Rage had entered a berserk state and theorized that the orb had functioned as a computational and regulatory device, originally responsible for controlling her power output. Rimuru immediately realized the situation had grown even more dangerous. Under normal circumstances, losing control would mean self-destruction. But Luvel Rage possessed limitless magicules. A monster with infinite energy and zero restraint was far more dangerous than a rational enemy. Luvel Rage could nullify all authorities and had already mastered attacks that pierced through everything. If that absurd volume of energy were released directly, the surface world would face total annihilation. Even with Gaia at the center, supported by Milim, Ramiris, Guy, and the others to maintain the maximum barrier, Rimuru judged it would only buy time, not stop the catastrophe. There was only one solution. Luvel Rage had to be defeated before she fully unleashed her power. But there was also a problem. Rimuru wasn't certain whether a full power strike would be equally effective against Luvel Rage's true body. The giant avatar had been erased with a single blow at 1/3 power, but the core body's durability was unknown. As Rimuru hesitated, two voices echoed within his mind, the lingering thoughts of Veldanava and Lucia. Veldanava admitted that asking this of Rimuru was unfair. Lucia followed, gently requesting that Rimuru give that child, Gaia, a name. Gaia was already akin to a reincarnated vessel of Veldanava, allowing their remaining thoughts to act directly upon his soul. It was the will of parents wishing to protect their daughter Milim and to leave hope behind through Gaia. Naming, of course, was Rimuru's specialty. He called out to Gaia, and the little dragon immediately flew over from Milim's arms. At that point, the audience started getting noisy again. Seeing Rimuru about to do something big, Guy complained that Rimuru never considered the situation. Diablo snapped back, accusing Guy of disrespecting Rimuru-sama. Feldway unbelievably sided with Diablo, condemning Guy for questioning the will of a god. Guy was on the verge of losing his mind. Finding the noise unbearable, Rimuru completely shut out the outside world and focused solely on Gaia. He accepted the request and solemnly declared, "From this day forth, Gaia shall be known as the Earth-Star Dragon, Velgaia, as the inheritor of Lucia, mother of Milim, and of the creator god Veldanava's will, live on as a new true dragon." The moment the declaration ended, Gaia burst into radiant light and let out a joyful cry. A new true dragon was born. Rimuru himself possessed the attributes of a true dragon, but considering Velgaia's legitimacy, Velgaia was formally recorded as the fifth true dragon. Veldora enthusiastically celebrated the birth of his little brother, only to be immediately corrected by his sisters that true dragons actually had no gender, and they already seemed to be plotting Velgaia's education. Rimuru felt the strong bond between Velgaia and Milim, and noticed that Velgaia was also connected to himself. Ciel chimed in, explaining that it was likely due to Rimuru being the one who named Velgaia. Moreover, Rimuru had already obtained true dragon nucleation, Earthstar. While Rimuru couldn't absorb Velgaia via true dragon release the way he did with Veldora, with Velgaia's consent, he could still be converted into a true dragon core. Rimuru was surprised to find that Elpis in his hand had undergone a physical change. Originally, the blade already had 3 slots fully occupied, but now a 4th slot had opened out of nowhere. Facing this newly formed opening, the freshly born Velgaia let out an eager, spirited cry. Looking at the small dragon brimming with fighting spirit, Rimuru decided to accept the gesture honestly. With 4 dragons united, the final piece of the decisive battle finally fell into place. At the same time, Elpis itself underwent a qualitative transformation. The blade shimmered with an eerie brilliance, radiating a mysterious and breathtaking 7-colored glow. This enhancement pushed Rimuru-side's combat power even higher under the current circumstances. However, something equally alarming was happening on Luvel Rage's side. She no longer intended to split off additional avatars. Instead, she continuously amassed power, restoring the 100-meter class colossal body she had used before, not as a separate entity, but as armor, a shell for her true body, preparing to unleash her power without restraint. Seeing this shift, Ciel delivered an extremely dangerous battlefield assessment, yet her attitude was completely unexpected. In the calmest possible tone, she stated that if this turned into a prolonged fight, victory would be assured. However, if things continued this way, Luvel Rage's attacks could affect every world across all dimensions. That massive reconstructed body functioned as a buffer. Protected by it, Luvel Rage could unleash her true full power without concern, triggering a destructive strike capable of impacting all operational worlds. What stood out was Ciel's demeanor. She said the situation was troublesome, yet her tone carried no concern at all. If anything, she seemed utterly unfazed. Seeing how composed Ciel remained, Rimuru himself did not panic. Once again, he reaffirmed how crucial his partner was. As long as Ciel was there, at least half the mental burden was gone. Luvel Rage's power surged endlessly, proving that Ciel's earlier trillion EP calculations had been absolutely correct. Only now did Rimuru realize something. The reason Ciel wasn't panicking, perhaps she was even anticipating this, might have been because she wanted to see Rimuru fight at full power. Or Maybe she was already deep into some wildly imaginative data collection fantasy. Unexpectedly, Ciel remained silent. That silence, more human than ever, felt like confirmation. She didn't say a word, and that in itself was the right answer. From behind, her silence gave Rimuru a final push, telling him, "Go on, there's no need to hold back." So Rimuru quietly began pouring power into Elpis. As he gathered strength, Rimuru reflected deeply on the nature of force. What made up combat power? Strength, technique, experience, intelligence, luck. But stripping away uncontrollable luck, while technique and intelligence mattered, raw power was what ultimately decided everything. Pure power was violence that swept all aside. No matter how refined one's strategy or skill, it meant nothing in the face of overwhelming force. Soft overcoming hard only applied within the bounds of common sense. It could not stand against brute force that transcended natural law. Just as humans could never defeat natural disasters, that was a universal truth. And Luvel Rage was exactly that kind of existence, a calamity itself, an enemy humanity could never oppose. Unlike Veldanava, she harbored no intent of destruction followed by rebirth. Driven by nothing but rage, she sought to annihilate Rimuru, his companions, and the world itself. Rimuru could never allow such idiocy. He taunted Luvel Rage. Luvel Rage exploded in fury, declaring that she had no need for this world and would destroy everything. Rimuru responded calmly. He doubted she could actually do it, but he was curious to see her try. In this final exchange, Rimuru was openly provocative and unyielding. He wasn't doing this for rhetoric. He was betting everything to completely negate Luvel Rage's existence. Rimuru believed that God does not roll dice. He only fought battles he could win. Luvel Rage crossed her twin swords. Rimuru assumed an Iaijutsu stance, originally planning to knock down the first strike with Tsubame Gaishi and deflect the second. But the enemy chose something completely unexpected. Luvel Rage threw them. With a roar of "Die!" she hurled the Genesis-grade swords, Kama and Memory, straight at Rimuru. This was no mere physical throw. The twin blades acted as fuses, detonating the terrifying energy condensed within them, power enough to destroy worlds multiple times over. It was the perfect embodiment of the principle that pure power equals violence. Faced with this world-ending attack, Rimuru found it almost laughably convenient. It was a terrible move. Without panic, Rimuru activated Soul Gluttony. Against released-type energy attacks, his imaginary space was the absolute counter, isolating and devouring everything wholesale. Just as Rimuru thought everything was under control, Ciel's next comment sent a chill down his spine. She casually remarked that normally such an enormous amount of energy could never be contained, but at this point it didn't really matter. Rimuru screamed internally. It was already absorbed, and Ciel already processed it. Why say something like that now? That was pure psychological warfare. To be honest, even here, the exact meaning of Ciel's comment was unclear. Perhaps it meant that a normal imaginary space, say, Geese, could never handle that magnitude of energy. But Rimuru-sama, of course, was another matter entirely. After all, he could already contain countless instances of nihilistic collapse without issue. Back to the battle, Ciel promptly reassured Rimuru. And now, the moment of counterattack had arrived. Rimuru refocused and switched turns. He signaled the companions within his sword. Veldora excitedly declared he would go all out. Velgrin stated she would hold nothing back. Velzard admitted she was actually feeling a bit excited. Velgaia let out a resonant cry. With everyone in agreement, Rimuru released all restraints. To avoid collateral damage, he compressed the vast power to an extreme degree, warping the space around the blade into something almost otherworldly. Nihilistic collapse was pushed into full operation. Even if shockwaves occurred, they would be nullified. After all, nihilistic collapse represented infinite negative energy. Rimuru executed what he judged to be the optimal tactical configuration. Ciel complained that nihilistic collapse was never meant to be used like this. Frankly speaking, this was like using a sledgehammer to kill a bird. She couldn't understand how Rimuru-sama could think this was the optimal solution, but once Rimuru-sama had decided, Ciel would support him 100%. He could win, under any circumstances. Rimuru interpreted this as classic tsundere Ciel behavior, complaining about improper usage on the surface, yet delivering flawless support all the same. Facing Rimuru's calm composure, even after devouring a world-ending attack, Luvelrage fell into confusion. In a dazed rage, she demanded to know what Rimuru even was. Rimuru laughed. He was Satoru Mikami, for sure. He was Rimuru Tempest, apparently. That answer alone already felt obvious enough, but Rimuru then calmly gave another name, another identity. Here, the author deliberately did not write the name. This was his classic behavior. It was clearly a name that brushed against the essence of the world itself, something akin to New God or Omniscience and Omnipotence. The interpretation was left to the reader. The moment Luvel Rage heard that name, she exploded with rage. She roared that she had already reclaimed Veldanava, fused completely, and therefore she herself was omniscient and omnipotent. Rimuru found the claim laughable. Luvel Rage's words were riddled with contradictions. She believed that by absorbing Veldanava and giving herself a name, she had returned to all is one, and thus attained omniscience and omnipotence. Rimuru delivered the decisive verdict. Luvel Rage's very existence was a contradiction. All is one meant a state without contradiction. The moment contradiction existed, true unity was impossible. Yet, Veldanava himself was a being of contradictions, wanting omniscience while yearning to escape loneliness, creating rules yet breaking them, for love. By absorbing such a contradictory existence and attempting to unify it, Luvel Rage could never become perfect. She could only become a massive contradiction given form. Ciel's closing remark followed immediately. Truth. At this stage, Rimuru had not only crushed his opponent on the level of power, but had completely negated Luvel Rage on the level of existence itself. The battle, in substance, was already over. Before delivering the final blow, Rimuru's thoughts were perfectly clear. On contradiction and dialogue, Rimuru understood that while diversity was ideal, it inevitably obstructed unity. Individual rights and collective cohesion were forever locked in tension. Because humans themselves were contradictory beings, coexistence had to be sought through dialogue, not violence. But none of that applied to Luvel Rage. Those who neither understood others' positions nor acknowledged others' rights, those who only consumed and took, could never engage in dialogue. If left unopposed, they would only devour everything. And so, Rimuru chose total resistance. It was time to end this. Rimuru swung his fully prepared finishing strike at the stunned Luvel Rage. Nihility Collapse Haze, Myriad Variety Petals. Luvel Rage was seized by overwhelming fear. Unable to comprehend her defeat, she spiraled into confusion. Why had she lost? It made no sense. Rimuru calmly declared her defeat and stated that he would eat her as well. The blade struck. Light and darkness intertwined. In the frozen world, Infon became a visible torrent of blinding radiance. At the same time, the dark demonic aura overflowing from Rimuru neutralized and purified the toxic miasma released by Luvel Rage's destruction, perfectly shielding those behind him. Luvel Rage attempted to resist, but before soul gluttony, resistance was meaningless. Rimuru coldly pronounced that Luvel Rage would be confined within his imaginary space, where she would have ample time to reflect upon and chew over her own foolishness and immaturity. That, he declared, was the greatest mercy he could grant her. The inescapable rainbow-black darkness swallowed her whole. No words, no screams, no lament. Luvel Rage dissolved into particles of light. At the moment her consciousness faded, Luvel Rage traced existence back to its origin and contemplated the nature of contradiction. First came the primordial world, an endless realm named death. No life, no excess, no lack. Only peace and shallow slumber. Then came division, Two halves were born, Veldanava and Ivarage. Veldanava, one half, flew toward freedom with courage, learned loneliness, and sought companions. Ivarage, the other half, lacked the courage to pursue wisdom and emotion, choosing instead a path where nothing could be felt. Finally came reunion and confusion. Now that the two had reunited as Luvel Rage, why had omniscience still not been attained? Rimuru had been right. There were many ways of thinking, all correct and all incorrect. Luvel Rage realized she no longer wished to abandon wisdom or emotion. To become an absolute god that affirmed everything without question would be boring. At the instant of this realization, Ciel's voice echoed within her consciousness, delivering the final answer. That was precisely why contradiction exists. This is the truth of chaos. Luvel Rage finally understood. Even having inherited Veldanava's authority, she could never become omniscient and omnipotent. The true path was not to eliminate contradiction, but to accept it and move forward, discovering new possibilities beyond it. And for that, a new god had to be born. That god already existed. And it was not Luvel Rage. With a satisfied smile and a quiet, "Ah, I see now," Luvel Rage's consciousness ceased completely, vanishing without a trace. Back in reality, Rimuru gently closed his imaginary space, declaring the battle completely finished. He idly noted that Luvel Rage would never be released, not even after his own death. Then a thought struck him. Did he even have a lifespan? Ciel immediately denied it, stating that her master was eternal and indestructible. Rimuru suspected she was lying. If that were true, life would get troublesome, so he chose to ignore it for now. Typical Rimuru. As for Luvel Rage's end, Rimuru noticed she had seemed satisfied. Ciel confirmed it casually. It seems that guy attained enlightenment as well. Rimuru couldn't help but complain that Ciel casually referring to Luvel Rage as that guy sounded way too familiar. Still, considering the outcome, this resolution was also a form of salvation for Luvel Rage. Within the chaotic imaginary space, he would be gently wrapped in nothingness and sleep forever. There even seemed to be some leftover fragments of Clayman in there, so Luvel Rage probably wouldn't feel lonely. Rimuru had once hoped Clayman would spend eternity in reflection, so it wasn't surprising that Ciel had responded to that wish and quietly made some adjustments. Rimuru chose not to dwell on it. Instead, he accepted it as his responsibility. By denying the resurrection of both Clayman and Luvel Rage, by rejecting their version of justice and forcibly imposing his own, he had to shoulder that causality. He would have to keep proving himself right. Only then could he ensure he wouldn't lose people's trust and wouldn't become a self-centered monster himself. With Luvel Rage erased, time began to flow again. Rimuru reflected on the terrifying truth behind his finishing move, Nihility Collapse Haze, Myriad Variety Petals. On paper, the numbers looked almost ordinary, but the reality was anything but. The core of the technique wasn't release, but containment. Most of the energy had been spent sealing the shockwaves. If left unchecked, that strike alone could have annihilated multiple universes. To destroy an ultra-high density energy life form like Luvel Rage, one had to collide it with energy of equal or greater magnitude. Such a collision wouldn't just shatter a universe, it would collapse entire dimensions. Even the maximum barrier, deployed by Gaia and the others, would have been utterly useless in the face of that level of power. Before that final strike, Rimuru had performed a test swing, the blow that destroyed Luvel Rage's giant beast body. Only now did he realize that the so-called 30% power hadn't meant output at all, but literally 1/3 of his total energy. Ciel confirmed that his understanding was correct. Rimuru decided not to verify it further, and definitely didn't want to try a second time. It was simply too dangerous. As time resumed, the heroes of the holy battlefield were released from their icy stasis, still disoriented. That was when the oldest demon lord, Gaia, approached Rimuru with a smile that screamed this was not the end. He casually said good work, then snapped an arm around Rimuru's shoulder, radiating a very clear message: you were not getting away. Ever since his complete defeat at Veldanava's hands, Gaia had sworn to reclaim a victory. And now, the one who had devoured Veldanava, Luvel Rage, had been taken down by Rimuru instead. If Rimuru had stolen the prey, then he had to take responsibility. Guy declared that from this moment on, Rimuru would ascend the throne as the one who ruled over all others, the great demon lord. Rimuru protested fiercely. He was ignored just as fiercely. Milliman Ramirez immediately voted yes, saying it already felt like they were being employed by Rimuru anyway. Luminous, the divine ancestor, supported the motion on purely rational grounds. Rimuru's influence had grown far beyond control, and judging by his subordinates alone, his power already surpassed everyone else's. Opposition was meaningless. She even cast a yes vote on behalf of the sealed Dagruel. Dino, of course, raised both hands in approval. This made it even easier to freeload under Rimuru's care. Rimuru was speechless. Dino had literally planned to betray them not that long ago. That grudge would definitely be settled with a pay cut. Then Leon delivered the decisive blow. He admitted that he hadn't even noticed when the final battle ended, and thus had no right to complain. Calmly, he acknowledged the existence of the great demon lord Rimuru-sama. With everyone in agreement, except Rimuru himself, the decision passed unanimously. The title structure was revised. Since Rimuru now stood above them all, the term octagram no longer applied. The remaining demon lords were temporarily renamed the Seven Sovereigns. The name lacked creativity, but no one objected. For people like them, having a title at all was more than enough. Just like that, while the heroes were still catching their breath, the highest power structure of the demon lord world was casually rewritten. Rimuru officially became the one and only great demon lord. After the battle, Luminous issued a holy declaration to the world. The official narrative announced that Ivarage and all his followers had been destroyed, and that the global crisis was over. To avoid public confusion, the names Veldanava and Luvelrage were deliberately omitted, with the focus placed on an evil god and the heroes who defeated it. At the end of the proclamation, the greatest merit was formally attributed to Rimuru, who was officially crowned Great Demon Lord Rimuru. Rimuru's image was projected into the skies of every nation alongside Luminous's announcement. Rimuru himself was mortified, but he had to admit the serious-looking version of himself on screen, modeled after Miss Shizu, was, well, pretty good-looking, not to toot his own horn. And just like that, Rimuru's name, as the savior Great Demon Lord, became known throughout the world. All right, that was all for this video. The core theme of this episode was how contradictions are handled. Both Luvel Rage and Veldanava sought to eliminate contradictions, and both chose extreme methods. One tried to reset the entire world. The other attempted to destroy everything and return to absolute stillness and unity. Rimuru, as the evolved new god, chose a different path, embracing contradiction. This was the next stage of the system's evolution. Rimuru's identity as a new god was made especially clear through the dialogue between Ciel and Luvel Rage. If you look back at the final battle between Rimuru and Ivarage, or Luvel Rage, you'll notice the number of actual exchanges was surprisingly small. Does that make this the best fight in all of TenSura? Probably not. Personally, Rimuru versus Veldora and Velgrind still ranks number one for me. What this battle excelled at wasn't spectacle, it was thought. Rimuru fought from a clear, top-down king's perspective, even with Ciel mostly acting as moral support, pushing Rimuru to rely on his own judgment and power. The sheer gap between him and Luvelrage was undeniable. Luvelrage believed that by absorbing Veldanava and returning to all is one, Omniscience and Omnipotence would follow. But that was wrong. All is one implies the absence of contradiction, yet Luvelrage itself was a walking contradiction. So then, is Rimuru omniscient and omnipotent at this stage? In terms of power, Rimuru crushed everything. With nihilistic collapse, he could create countless universes, and he even absorbed Luvel Rage. On paper, he seemed to possess all the traits of omnipotence, but the voice of the world still existed, and a state of perfect unity would be stagnant and boring, devoid of contradiction. Rimuru clearly didn't fit that mold. The new god born from world evolution wasn't about absolute unity. It was about embracing contradiction, pursuing diversity, harmony, and coexistence. From that alone, Rimuru was not omniscient or omnipotent in the classical sense. Finally, Rimuru being elevated to Great Demon Lord was essentially the coronation ritual of the new god. His existence stood on the same level as Veldanava's, so a clear distinction from figures like Gi, Luminous, Dino, Milim, Dagrul, and Ramirez was inevitable. As for Leon, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he exited the Demon Lord Circle next. The gap was just too wide. In our next episode, as you probably already know, we'll be covering the last chapter of Volume 23, the final chapter of the main series, focusing on the aftermath of the battle, Rimuru saving Satoru and Miss Shizu, and finally revealing the true nature of their relationship. The next episode will be just as exciting. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support was greatly appreciated. See you in the next one.